Yeah, so now it's being recorded. So why don't we go ahead, and then afterwards I'll share some things with you guys as well. So why don't you go ahead, and I'll turn on my video so it turn off so it doesn't record my own video, so they can see your presentation.
Okay. Okay. So really, probably, and this is just to lay down and to open the discussion, the few pillars that I guess, would want to address for year two are enterprise risk management definition. So we are all on the same page of what it means. And we all understand and can display a kind of consistent and structured information in our own organization. It's really to work together on the risk management cycle. So work on this iterative process, so making some business cases and taking some examples. Also look at how in our organization we can apply it and to where. And really bringing at the table two possible approaches for managing risks enterprise-wide. And in between those two approaches, there's many other options. Those are really the big two pillars. And I would say anything can be done in between. Also, what do we need in our toolbox to design the enterprise risk management program? So here it comes with designing together some artifacts, some tools to have in our toolbox, and also the notion of training. How are we going to display in our organization the awareness, the education around risk management to get and seek buy-in and commitment from the teams around the company? And also, we are going to talk about really how do we do in practice to implement this enterprise risk management program by engaging, facilitating, monitoring, and reporting. So those are really the four pillars I think we could look at for this year and working together on. So first, and I think that's what's important, is that for enterprise risk management or for risk management, really, we do not have to be so creative or to reinvent the wheel, because we have some international standards that are well known, that have been existing for the last 15 years. So we don't need to, again, reinvent the wheel, but just really know or learn what has been the outcome of 15 years of enterprise risk management, with different experiment, with successes, with failures. So those really two big standards are what we call the COSO, which is the Committee of Sponsoring Organizations for the Tradeway Commission. And COSO is really focusing on the control of the risk, what we call the mitigation. So enterprise risk management, how it is defined, is a process, and it is a process with some specific steps, effected by an entity, board of directors, management, and other personnel, applied in strategy setting and across the enterprise. So enterprise risk management is across the enterprise. It's not just somewhere either with the board or somewhere in the plant. It's everywhere in the company, designed to identify potential events that may affect the entity and manage risk to be within its risk appetite, and we will touch base upon that later, I guess, this year, to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of entity objectives. The Association for Enterprise Risk Management says risk is an uncertain event. Should it occur, would have a negative impact on the objective. So it's really, you have to be clear, we have to be clear about our objective when we start risk management, because risk management is about seeing what are the potential obstacles big obstacle for us to achieve our objective. We have also to be cognizant of the fact that when we say risk management, it's actually risk and opportunity management, because risk and opportunity are the two sides of the same coin. Is there any question on this definition and or on any of these terminology or principles? No?
Nope.
Okay. No? Okay. So, as I say, enterprise risk management, it's a process. So, meaning it's an ongoing exercise, and it goes with everybody in the company, every layer of the company across time. So you have to start somewhere. We'll see that, but enterprise risk management really encompasses every activities in the company in order to have a robust view of what the risk could be across your organization, the organizations. The prerequisite. This is the first point for enterprise risk management. Not only your CEO, general manager, president, whatever the title the head of your organization has, but he or she not only has to be aware that enterprise risk management is going to be done in the company, but has to support and has to be engaged in enterprise risk management. And the same for the senior leadership team. So I understand that in public utilities in general, or in the public domain in general, it might not be so natural for risk management to be in a company. And it might be I would say, a first obstacle to overcome. But really engaging the CEO, the general manager, and the senior leadership to have them on your side, on board, is really, really important. So, Jessica, could you speak a little bit on how in your organization this is working? Do you have a full-time position around enterprise risk management? Can you share a bit with us?
We have a risk and safety department. So there are, I think, 3 people in that department specifically. I would say they're mostly focused on the real internal safety aspects of the organization, maybe a little less focused on general risk. I think the only time where they really focus on general risk is if we need to reach out with our insurance company if there are concerns that we think might have liabilities that could affect us. Like for example, the other week when we talked about the residential meter crock inspections, they've kind of gotten involved from that perspective. But for the most part, I would say the engagement is a little more minimal in terms of kind of everyday operations. It's more when we reach out to them with a specific issue that they would kind of engage in discussion.
Okay. And do you have some other areas of your organization that also somehow address risk? And I'm thinking maybe finance, and I know you're in asset management, so I'm sure you are doing some risk aspect also. So do you have some other divisions or departments in your organization that directly or indirectly are addressing risks?
Well, I know our finance department is definitely addressing, risk from the financial perspective, and from asset management, we work with them, a good bit as we're planning for future rehab and replacement. We have our own, risk calculations from the asset management side to, look at level of service and reputational impacts of different types of decisions.
Mhm.
So I would say we have a lot of different departments that are addressing risk, just maybe not all together.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Elaine, it sounds like where you might be going is trying to help Jessica identify, what might be a domain that she could work in, whether it's a function of the organization or types of, risk or whatever, so that she could get her arms around something and use that as a model. And if there were a willing group of part of the organization, because sometimes it's hard to say, now let's go to enterprise, management for the enterprise as a whole. That's sometimes a big step. And, and it sounds like, which is the case with a lot of organizations where they define risk as really liabilities, financial liabilities, and it's more of a financial type of function. But if there were a function of the organization that she wanted to work with that could apply the methodology for risk management and apply it in a certain area, then it could be a springboard to do it elsewhere as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I really liked the exercise that you were explaining the other week, Helene, about getting all of the groups together and sort of having a regular, let's talk about all of our problems, our potential problems, talk about all of the risks that are out there, and really get together and discuss them. And I think that is a really good opportunity for our organization to
Mhm.
kind of get everybody in the same room, because it is a little, we have our risk and safety department, but it is, they sort of have their focus, and then we all have our focus in different departments on risks that affect us.
Mhm.
Um, so, I mean, I think there's definitely a good opportunity to pull all of the groups together and say, let's make this a group conversation and kind of help each other through these issues.
If I can,
Cello
if
has
I
his
can-
hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can offer how things are at the Metropolitan Water District, which is a large organization. It has, I think, about 1,800 people. But the person who, quote, is in charge of risk is one person in finance and another person who works mostly on business continuity. So the person who's also in finance. So the person, one of them, I think, pretty much exclusively deals with insurance issues, and even like health insurance, and the Metropolitan is self-insured, so they have no role in asset management that I'm aware of, no role in project management that I can see, and they're kind of detached, from the rest of the organization. There's not, and I think that the people who are project managers or ones who are in asset management only now are starting to think about risk in a structured way. They have been thinking about risk, but not in a structured way. There's not a methodology or a cookbook. They just kind of go by what different people know, is my experience. And there's also a lot of information, such like, that could be used in risk, such as, measuring the temperature on the bearings, measuring vibration, inspection reports from corrosion, and all these things. And they're all being dealt kind of separately. They haven't been, so in engineering, they deal with corrosion. So they kind of look at that problem. But they look at the problem from many different areas, but there's not a consistency. I'm not aware that anybody knows the standards that you are mentioning. There's methodology that's standard, no practice. That's kind of what I see. I don't know if this resonates with Jessica at all.
It does. Yeah, I think we're measuring a lot of different things that contribute to an overall risk assessment, but it's not all together. And one of the things we're doing right now is we're focusing on business intelligence and trying to pull in all the different sources of information to help us with risk. And I think we have a lot of good programs out there. They just need to talk to each other, and we need the information in one place. And that's kind of where we're struggling. I think we're headed in the right direction. We're making steps towards that goal, but we've still got a ways to go in terms of bringing everything together. We're also looking right now at maybe investing in a tool to help us with our linear asset prioritization. So we're looking at different vendors that are out there. So we're trying to kind of find our way through this and looking at different options. But business intelligence is definitely our first focus, and trying to get all of our systems to talk to each other.
If I can just interject one thing, I smiled when Jessica said linear assets. We're having one project to rehabilitate one of the conduits. It's $2 billion. So there is so much money underground, and we have a pilot project. I don't want to drone on about this too much, but there are a lot of issues with using that data in a smart way. So anyway, I'll just end at that. We should continue with your show. With your presentation. I mean.
No, very interesting. And why I asked the question to Jessica about the different entities in our organization that do risk management, it's because enterprise risk management is really about having those different pieces put together, as if you will, enterprise risk management would be the director in an orchestra where you have to make sure that the violin are playing at the same time as the piano or playing at the same time as the saxophone. So it's really about it. But only for the big risks, not going into the weeds, but we are going to look into that. So enterprise, the risk management cycle is really made of 5 steps: identification, assessment, response, monitoring, and reporting. So I'm going to pause here for 1 minute, because what does it mean in practice? It means that every area of your organization can do this cycle. You take a project. On a project, you have to build a nuclear plant, for example. You are going to identify your risk for this nuclear plant. You are going to assess those risks. You are going to respond to this risk. You are going to monitor them, and you are going to report them. When you're a division in a major corporation, you are going to do exactly the same cycle for your entire division, with, of course, the objective of the division. When you are on a program with several projects, each risk management piece for each project is going to be a consolidation at a program level, where each top risk for each the project under that program will be reported at the program level. Example, you take Boeing or you take Airbus. They have several programs of planes, right? So they identify their risk for each of their projects, and it goes into the top program. And at the company level, it's exactly the same thing. You are going to look at your risk in a plant. You are going to identify those risks, respond to those risks, assess those risks, respond to those risks, monitor those risks, and report those risks. In a depot, you're going to do the same thing. For a project, you're going to do the same thing. And you are going to roll up the top risk to the level up, until actually you see there's some commonalities across those risks in your organization, where you have big ticket items that come, and those would be, typically speaking, your top risk. So risk management, you can apply it in a very small project in your organization, exactly as it is. You can apply it to your division or to the entire company. Okay. So in asset management, when you look at the risk for your assets in general, to determine which assets are critical, you have your full list of assets, and then you look how old are your assets. You're looking at the expectancy, life expectancy of each of your assets and how critical they are to fulfill your mission, right? So you are ranking those risks, and basically a certain number of risks come up in the red zone. It might be a different color, but in the like top risk. So you are going to monitor particularly, or you are going to put in place a program for those specific assets. So basically it's staying in the red zone, going down to the orange zone, ideally, and in order for this risk not to become a reality, right? And you are going to monitor that. And you are going to report that on your asset management plan every year, saying, okay, we've done this or this or this. So what you do in asset management in terms of principle, it's exactly the same thing that engineering is doing, using engineering standards to do that. That some safety is looking at the safety risk, yes. Finance is looking at the financial impact, which is not a financial risk in a public entity. Looking at the financial impact. And so enterprise risk is really about coordinating all those efforts by sitting down with the people and saying, okay, here in asset management, I have identified this risk, but it has some financial repercussion, but not only. It might have also some reputational issue. You may be on the first page of the Washington Post or on CNN, right? Or on Fox, whatever you're looking at. So basically, risk management, again, is the director in a kind of orchestra, listening and hearing what all the parties have to say in terms of top risk, and also connecting the dots in between those different divisions in a company that very often, private, public, are working in silos. Because what you do here has a repercussion on what somebody else does. And maybe what somebody does is the cause of your risk, or one of the causes of your risk.
Right. It's in your organization, are you measuring the risk the same across the organization? Does finance kind of use the same methodology as you would for assets and so on, so that it's consistent?
Yeah. The methodology is the same. I mean, identifying, assessing, responding, monitoring, and reporting. The matrix is not the same. Why?
Okay.
And I think we touched base a little bit maybe in one of our meetings on this. Why? For example, there's some engineering standards with some codes to design a plant, to design a system. Those codes must be adhered to. And those codes are saying you have to have a probability of 0.000 whatever for number one. Okay, that's the engineering code. So engineering is keeping their matrix. Here we are talking about an artifact, a matrix, right? Asset management, my colleagues in asset management here at WSSC Water, they have a specific matrix due to the assets. At an enterprise level, you have a matrix that is covering it all. So it doesn't mean there's a bit of this and a bit of that. It means what does it make sense for the company to have as a matrix. And I can bring up WSSC Water 1 because, again, that's just an example. And everything is debatable. So this is
everyone kind of has their own way of getting to those numbers, but then the numbers come together into one overall measurement activity. Yeah.
But Jessica, you were talking about that there's pretty wide interest from different quarters, and if you were to get these people together and just have them go through what Helene was describing, which is identify, you know, what are the biggest risks that you have? What are the biggest risks that you have and that you have, and then apply the common framework to it without getting too elaborate initially, then you might be able to in other words, identify and prioritize what the leading risks are and which ones people might want to assess and mitigate.
Yeah, that's one way of doing it, and a general conversation can be launched. However, I would really recommend to have in your toolbox, before we start this discussion, an agreed upon risk matrix with threshold. And why? Because you are going to identify the risk, and I can tell you hundreds of stories. So you're in a group and somebody says, okay, I see this as a big risk. Risk of explosion, for example, of something. I'm just picking up something. And okay, and so you ask, why would it explode? Blah, 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 blah. And if it explodes, what could be the consequences? The consequences could be blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then say, oh, yeah, that's a very big risk. Okay. Okay. What is the probability that it explodes? And here, person says, wow, it's not going to happen. There's 0 point or 10 minus 16 chance it happen in a lifetime. Okay, okay. And if it explodes, how do you see the consequences? The consequences would be massive. Yeah, we agree. Okay. So here, basically, with your probability of 10 minus 16, exponent, I don't know how you said that in English, exponent minus 16, whatever. Basically, you are here in the context of a black swan, meaning very unlikely probability, massive impact, right? Meaning just like an act of God, a pandemic, an epidemic, etc., etc. As a company, this might not be enterprise-wide what you want to focus on, because by nature and by standard and by design, all the controls you have in place on this system not to explode are there, right? So you want to focus actually on the high probability and the high consequences, massive consequences. But in order to agree on that, what is high and high, you need to have a risk matrix, because then your probability score, as you know, Jessica, and your impact score multiplied together will give you the red zone risk. And this is where you would want to focus. So those discussions are very healthy, because somebody and people, and we are all like that, we say, oh yeah, that's a very big risk, because this is what you are dealing with, right? And when you have some tools and some data agreed upon to look at them more carefully, maybe it's a big risk. So then let's deal with it. But it might not be, at the end of the day, such a big risk after some discussion, exchange of information in between people. So having your tools in your toolbox prior launching an enterprise-wide risk, let's say coordination, if you will, is very important. Other example, when I talk to my colleagues, when we started this program in asset risk management, so they were telling me, yes, Hélène, here, you know, this asset, we have 0.000% chance that it fails. And here we have a massive probability. So that's really, really very important. Yeah, it is. It is. It is. Now, you've said it yourself. Your probability is so low. Okay. How much money do you need to spend to reduce your probability to zero? $2 billion? That's not going to happen. Okay, so, okay, I hear you. This is a high risk for you. What is under our control that we can do so this risk is outside your critical asset risk? We do all what we can. Okay, so here we basically have the answer. However, let's focus. Our infrastructure is aging, right? Like every infrastructure in the US. So is there some critical assets that we know we can do something upon. Yeah, we have a list of, let's say 10. I'm picking a figure. Okay. And why do you say those assets are critical, are also on your red zone risk? Because they are old, and because maybe we have not focused on them, and also because they, let's say 1 million people will not have water if those assets were failing. Yeah, that's a very good reason. That's critical, right? So what can we do? Hey, maybe we can focus on preventive maintenance, right? So it means that the dollar money that we have, that's budgeted, instead of using it there, don't take me wrong, it's important there, but maybe there's a piece that we could focus here and inspect the pipes or do something. And we could design those mitigation strategies because first we have agreed that on the top risk, probability that they fail, so kind of high probability. For WSSC water, a moderate probability is between 10 and 50%, a high probability between 50 and 80%, and a very high probability above 80%. Okay, that's WSSC water threshold. Those thresholds are to the discretion of the organization. What makes sense? Okay, that was just an example. Cello, I'm sorry. You wanted to say something?
One of the things, I think it's very interesting. One of the things that I think is challenging is that doing anything across the enterprise is very difficult. Doing anything that requires many people to collaborate is really difficult in a utility for a number of reasons. Are there things that could be selected? Maybe it's assets, maybe it's projects, where this methodology could be applied, and I understand that it would not be an enterprise risk management, but if it could be the methodology you described in an area that's most receptive to it, and then when it's successful, gradually expand to other areas. My question is that there are a lot, the more, quote, enterprise things get, you need collaboration of more people, you need data from different places, and it becomes a lot more difficult to manage. So would it be possible to bite off a chunk and do it kind of in a kind of yeah.
So then it's not enterprise risk management, it's risk management.
Yes.
And risk management, the utilities are doing it. I mean, Jessica is doing already. I mean, she knows the process. She's doing it in asset management. Asset management in WSSC Water is doing it. Finance is doing some sort of, depending on the maturity of the utility, but some risk management. So what you're describing, Cello, I'm not saying in every utility, but in most of the utilities, in some aspect of their organization, either safety, finance, asset management, they do risk management. They just do not do enterprise risk management. And enterprise risk management, to come back to your point, yes, collaboration when you put a lot of people in the room can be difficult, but you don't necessarily have to do it this way also. And there's not only one way to do it. But for the exact reason that you mentioned, for example, at WSSC Water, I am seeing every division independently. I mean, and again, there's some maturity state, but when you start, you see every division independently, because first you want them to get used to talk about their risk. A risk is not personal, right? It's not somebody who made a mistake. That's another showstopper. The message has to be delivered in such a way that we, as a company, we are facing some risk inherently, naturally, whatever we do, right? So it's not because you didn't do something or he or she didn't do something, it's because we commonly have risk. So let's put them at the table. Let's create a forum and a safe place to talk about the top risk that you see in your area. And you do that for each activity in your company. So for example, at WSSC Water, Every quarter, I have 20 different risk workshops with each of the division, each of them, right? So they can bring freely at the table their risk. When the maturity and the habit is created, of course, there's some bridge there. And then you start putting people together. Example, we have some working groups now, WSSC Water, on the top risk of the company. Why? Because each division identifying their top risk. There are some commonalities in between those 20 directors and 20 divisions at WSSC Water, okay? And those top 10, 15 risk and opportunity that commonly they have identified, those needs to be addressed. And it's not when you see somebody an hour every quarter, somebody, by the way, who has day-to-day business to do, that you can really go into the weeds. So we are creating some what we call task force, you can call it work group, as you want. Really with experts, subject matter expert, on what can we do in practice to address those top risks commonly seen by the entire organization. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. And I think it's all great. What I'm thinking is that perhaps different groups, asset management or project management, may be at different levels of maturity in terms of how they deal with risk and things like that. So you, if I understand you correctly, you first work with each individual group to kind of raise their awareness, and then you try to bring them together, or is that wrong?
Yeah, no, yeah, you're correct. Actually, the first, I mean, I'm not going through methodically through my presentation because we are talking, but really, I will go methodically through it at some other point. But really, what's important first is to have your toolbox. Okay, you have your basic risk management tool, meaning your risk register, your risk matrix, and your risk universe. And we'll come to that. That's what, Cello, you call the artifact. And once you've done that, you are training every single person on what is it you want to achieve. So you are presenting the tools, and as you are providing your training, you ask them to take some example. You are talking about the identification phase of the cycle. So as you said, Cello, asset management, they are very familiar with risk management. So I don't need to explain them what identifying a risk is, right? So I would be with Jessica, I would say, Jessica, what is your top risk today? What is keeping you awake at night? And Jessica will tell me blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then as we want to have a structured approach, and I will go more in the weeds, we will go more in the weeds in our other meetings, you want to define what could be the causes that could trigger this risk, and what could be the consequences should this risk materialize. And why do you want to do that? It's called the bow tie approach. You want to do that because it will be much easier afterwards to devise some mitigation strategies, because mitigation strategies are about addressing the causes, controlling the causes, and or reducing the impact. Okay? And a group who is not familiar with that, so they say, my top risk might be this vendor. Okay, why this vendor? Because it's supplying something that is critical for the commission. Okay, why is it critical for the commission? Because blah, 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 blah. Are you sure it is so critical? And by the way, is it just that vendor, or is it a group of vendors supplying this to the commission? No, we only have one vendor. So do you think this could be your risk? You have only one vendor, a sole source vendor, supplying one thing that is essential for the commission to deliver. So do you see this as a risk? Is it your perception? So that's the kind of discussion that you have in these kind of groups, right? You ask questions, you try to extract from people's mind what do they see at the end. And very interestingly, when you have several people in a room, of course, the perception is different because the level of information is different. So there's some discussion in small groups that are engaged. But why do you say that? No, you're wrong. Why do you say I'm wrong? Because da. I didn't know that. So, I mean, that's the kind of discussion that's happening even at the beginning when you do your training. But training people about what are the expectations, how we are going to do it on a structured manner, and how it's going to be followed through, and how it's going to be reported is very important. Very, very important. And again, that's why your general manager and CEO has to know and has to be engaged. Why? We are a public entity. By definition, except some specific document, as you know, the public can ask for it. So if you produce document, okay, and somebody, for whatever reason, although the probability is very low, is going to ask you for the risk register or for the risk work, you need your GM and CEO to be aware of that. And you need his or her support, because this is going actually to help the strategic plan, and so it's going to help the CEO, GM to follow through on his strategic objective, but also to design his strategic or her strategic objectives.
Okay.
So yes, inherently today, the companies are doing are doing risk management with their own tools. It's a matter of enterprise risk management or consolidating, bringing to the next level the risk that those who have already identified risk have done it, and for those in the organization who have not done it, to bring them on board of this adventure. That's really what it is about.
Okay.
Have I been clear?
Yeah, I'm just asking questions because I see that although, you know, at our large organization, there's none of this stuff. I mean, it's so dispersed, it's so disconnected. People just don't think that way, you know. So I'm just thinking, can we do it in kind of smaller steps, baby steps, you know?
I mean, again, and what I'm saying for enterprise risk management, meaning that you assess your risk and your opportunities towards an objective. The objective of enterprise risk management are not the same objectives as the objective just for risk management in one area of a company where it's already done. So if we are talking risk management or enterprise risk management, we are not seeking the same objective here. So I just want to be, clear on what we are trying to do here. And for enterprise risk management, basically you have two possible approaches. Either you have the top-down approach, or which is what we do. So here, for example, strategic is the commission, the general management, the DGMs, and the general counsel. So it may be some other parties in your organization. Typically speaking, your senior leadership team. The tactic level is the senior leadership team here at WSSC Water. So it's really the directors, where you have basically the units, business units, we will call it in the private sector. And you have really the operational layer, where we are going to look really in the details, all the aspect of the risk. So for example, asset is one of them. When we go in detail, the plants, the depots are really the operational level. There's another way, as I mentioned, that you can do it. You can start with the operational level and look, and I think it's connected to what you were saying, Cello, where you look really at some working level or very, very operational aspect, like the projects, the plants, the depot, the risk. And then hoping that you would engage after the division manager to consider those risks in their strategy. Hoping then that all the directors will bring those risks in a consolidated manner to a strategic level. This can be done. This can be done. To me, it's not the, how shall I say? It's not the, not fastest way, but yeah, probably it's not the fastest way. And there's a lot of uncertainty residing with the fact that it may not get to the level above. And you have the people in the plants, for example, working on their risk, addressing their risk, and they want to alert their hierarchy on those risks, but the hierarchy is kind of not willing to hear those risks. So it creates frustration. So the bottom-up approach has its virtues. It can work in certain organizations. So that's why it's out there, it's possible. And anything in between is also possible. But again, as a prerequisite to have your top executive not only being aware, but supporting this makes a huge difference. So if I had to work on something, that's what I would work on, trying to get the discussion, to open the discussion with the GM CEO on this one, which I did when I started that, and see how it goes. And basically the feedback you are going to receive from your GM, VP, or president, or whatever the title this person has, is going to be instrumental to be able to deploy your risk management program, either enterprise or not enterprise. Because, and here it's not a matter of public or private sector, but if you have a top boss who say, you know what, I don't want to see the risk, I don't want to hear about them, I'm here for another 2 years, then I'm retiring, I want to stay out of trouble, right? So don't talk to me about that. Then, I mean, there's so much you can do, right? However, if you have a top boss who say, yes, I want us as a company to have a strategic view, to really look at what our opportunities and our risk out there, and to put some effort to focus on those that are really important so we can do better, okay? We can create the value, and we can create value and protect our existing value. So yes, please go ahead. Then that's wonderful. But yeah.
One thing I'm hearing, Helena, going back to the beginning of the conversation, was the common framework, the common matrix, the common training, the common understanding of what's trying to be accomplished, and what that bigger picture looks like is one aspect to go through. And then it's a matter of, okay, how should we accomplish all this, you know, and do we take it in bite-sized portions, or, you know, what do we do first, second, third? MCES, what they did is they decided, after looking at that common framework, to do actually both things that you mentioned. One, they looked at enterprise risk, but they also looked at operational risk. They got their facility representatives together and a cross-functional group, and they identified operational type of risks that and prioritized those and everything, and that actually became input to the enterprise-wide.
Absolutely.
You know, so, but it could be, you know, bigger, smaller, whatever might apply. And we have Jessica here on the phone, but we're also going to have other participants who may not be as far down the path, and so they're going to need to decide, you know, what their work plan might look like. But one common thing that you talked about was really, you know, and going back to last week's or 2 weeks ago slides that you had, which you brought up in part here again, is what is kind of a framework, a common understanding that we have around this, which is a little different than, you know, looking at like insurance risk, you know, a citywide risk, you know, in some cases, or enterprise-wide, just from a financial standpoint. So anyway, we probably, you know, beat this to death a little bit today, but we might be thinking also just about the other participants who aren't on the phone, who may not want to say, let's go for the whole enchilada, you know, during this 6 months, for example, but it could be that it includes some pieces of what's been talked about today.
Oh yeah, the beauty of it, and as we mentioned, this cycle, identify, assess, respond, monitor, and report can be applied, as we said, to everything, to a project, to a plant, to a depot, to asset management, to engineering, to finance, to it can be applied to everything. That's risk management. The enterprise piece is something different, but I mean something different. It's a mechanism to escalate risk, but risk management itself, and I mean, Jessica, you do it. So, however, when we talk about the tools, again, the matrix, for example, in asset management, you may have your matrix, and engineering will have its matrix. Okay, so meaning that you have inherently by nature, and that's how it is, two tools, because they are imposed by standards, right? So I would say, which of your risks are more important for a company at large? If you do not have this mechanism to roll it up to enterprise with a common tool, you have no means to know it, right? But here again, if we talk about the risk management process or enterprise risk management process, risk management is many pieces all put together for the enterprise one. Okay, so yeah, it's different. It's a different approach. It's what could exist in silos when you do enterprise risk management in different divisions. It's again kind of coordinated, aligned across the enterprise with enterprise risk management. But yeah, Chalo.
I know you have a hard stop, so I'm going to stop the recording.
Yeah.